Hello and welcome to our webinar. Today, our webinar will be featuring Dr. Karen McAvoy and Dr. Halstead, and we'll be discussing virtual resources with real solutions, online tools for concussion management offered by the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators. I'm Rebecca Wolfkiel, NASHIA's Executive Director, and Maria Crowley, NASHIA's Director of Professional Development, is our webinar organizer today. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're not familiar with NASHIA, we're a nonprofit organization that was created to assist state governments with promoting partnerships and building systems to meet the needs of individuals with brain injury and their families. A GoToWebinar user guide is available for download from the NASHIA website. This is a great resource for making the most of your live webinar experience. Handouts of today's presentations are available for download. Check your attendee control panel for the handouts pane. And to ask questions during the webinar, please just enter them into the questions pane on your control panel, and our organizer will forward your question to our speaker after the presentations are completed. If we run out of time today and we're not able to address all questions, the presenter will respond to your question via email at their convenience. Certificates of attendance are available for today's event, and the webinar will be archived for later access as well. Today, I am excited to introduce you to a new collaboration with two close partners. Dr. Halstead is the go-to physician with the American Academy of Pediatrics for guidance on concussion management for return to play and return to learn. He authored an AAP article in 2013 as the clinical report on return to learn. It still stands as the official guide to pediatricians on return to learn. An excerpt from this guide states, "Return to learn for a student following a concussion is a challenge, given the limited research that exists in this area of concussion and its management. Because of this shortage of research, the guidance provided in this clinical report is based primarily on expert opinion and adapted from a program developed in Colorado to address the issue of return to learn. That program is REAP, which now has been customized in many states and remains a helpful tool to state lead agencies and brain injury affiliates in bringing together the various partners' needs to keep students safe following concussion as they return to school and to sports." NASHIA is very excited to be partnering with Dr. Halstead and Dr. McAvoy to bring you a snapshot of REAP today and how it might benefit your state. We are also excited to be partnering with Dr. McAvoy in creating a NASHIA REAP. This partnership will assist brain injury stakeholders with customization and training and implementation of REAP within your state. A sample REAP as well as the article is included in the attached documents for this webinar, which can be downloaded from your control panel's handout pane. Also attached is a flyer outlining options for NASHIA to work with you on customized approaches for implementing REAP in your state. Please let us know if you would like more information. We would love to talk with you more about this. Bios for our presenters are also included in the handout pane. I'm now going to go ahead and introduce our presenters today. Dr. Karen McAvoy is a brain injury educational consultant in Fort Collins, Colorado. She is a clinical and school psychologist, and in addition to REAP, is co-founder of GetSchooledOnConcussions.com, a website and training curriculum for educators to better work with students with concussion as they return to school. Dr. McAvoy is also a NASHIA consultant. Dr. Mark Halstead is the team physician for the Washington University Sports Medicine in St. Louis, Missouri. Dr. Halstead has served on the American Academy of Pediatrics Executive Committee for the Council on Sports Medicine and Fitness, as well as the Board of Directors of the American Medical Society for Sports Medicine. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
So we can go ahead and we can get started. So next slide. So I'm going to kind of set the table, so to speak, for us today, and just kind of talking about some general statistics about concussions. And obviously, as a sports medicine physician, I have a lean towards sports-related concussions, and so much of my part will have statistics based on that. And that's just because we do have actually a lot of good statistics on that. It's been a hot topic or hot area for the last decade plus, and so there has been a fair amount of research done on this. So the good news, I always like to start off my talks with good news because there's way too much, unfortunately, bad news that's out there from a media standpoint related to concussions and traumatic brain injury. But the good news is for the vast majority of concussions that we see, so depending on the research you look at, between 70 and 85% are going to be without symptoms by about 3 to 4 weeks following their injury. So we do expect this to not be a very long lasting problem, but can be quite problematic for some people, especially early on in the process. And less than 5% of patients, and some studies even suggest as low as 2.5%, are going to have symptoms that last longer than 6 weeks. So again, if we're seeing lots of kids who are dealing with their mild traumatic brain injury problems from sports or recreational activities lasting longer than that, we need to start thinking about some other things. And we'll talk about some things later on as why someone may not be improving. And really, I find the best management for this injury is appropriate education about the injury itself, explaining what happens in the brain, and then also talking about appropriate ways to deal with this, and actually sometimes dealing with things that may be the myths out there as far as how to take care of this problem. So next slide. And then the bad news part of this is there are many misconceptions that are out there about concussions. We still hear these on a regular basis. And unfortunately, a lot of providers are not totally equipped to provide the appropriate guidance and evaluation. It is an ever-changing field. And so it is certainly the area that I deal with the most in sports medicine, that I have to keep up on this topic regularly because there is always new things coming out with regards to how we manage and what works and what doesn't work. And so it is difficult for a general practitioner to sometimes keep up with that, especially when they're not focused on this topic entirely like people like myself may be, or like Karen may be. So next slide. So why do we even care about talking about this in concussions? And so the one thing, like I mentioned before, not all concussions are going to get better in a week. There used to be the phrase that, we expect the concussions to get better in 7 to 10 days. And that may hold true for some of the older patients we see from sports-related concussions in sports, so the professional athletes. But that's not the case for kids. And so when we talk about kids, we do have to have an expectation that they may take longer. A lot of the studies will suggest that only half of kids are going to get better within that 7 to 10 day period, as opposed to what it used to be thought to be that most got better in that 7 to 10 days. The majority of concussions from sports occur in school age individuals. And so obviously this has relevance when we talk about return to learn and getting kids back into the school setting. We know that cognitive function is affected after a concussion, which can certainly have an effect on what we need to talk about with return to learn. And people may experience things related to their environment around them. So light and noise, if they have lots of sensitivity to light or noise, that may provoke or worsen their symptoms and may make them feel worse temporarily while they're dealing with their injury. So next slide. So just to talk about kind of some statistics from male sports here. So there's varying studies here that have looked at this. You'll notice that some of the sports here have only a couple bars or a solitary bar to them, and that's because some of the sports that we're talking about, like hockey and lacrosse, are more regional, at least in their expanse and the research that's been done on these, so they don't have statistics from all of these individual studies. We do know that football obviously is the most likely sport if you were a male to get a concussion in, but hockey is not too far behind, followed by lacrosse. And actually, interestingly, some of the more recent studies have suggested wrestling have rates that are up there rivaling hockey and lacrosse as well. And certainly I have seen that in my personal experience. I think it's one of the sports that is a little bit under-recognized now for concussions, and still one of the sports that tends to have not as much attention paid to concussions, and it's kind of swept under the rug as far as an injury still to hide, whereas football, so much attention has been brought to that even though athletes are still trying to hide that injury to some extent, I certainly see it's something that is brought a lot more attention to than wrestling. So hopefully we're starting to see more of that attention paid to wrestling with some of these more recent studies. So next slide. And then in females, soccer by far is the most likely sport to get a concussion, and some of the more recent studies on there as well have suggested that rates of concussion in females for soccer rival that of male football. And those I know have received some attention when those studies were published in the media about those high rates. And then we see a smattering of sports outside of that of rates that are all kind of in that similar range there for concussions as well. But certainly soccer is the one that we get most concerned about with female athletes. So next slide. This one here is actually looking a little bit differently at concussions and how they occur, rather than just kind of how frequent are they or by sport. This one looks at concussions as a percentage of total injuries in that individual sport. So the thing I want to have you pay attention to is three of these slides, or four of these bars here. So boys ice hockey, boys lacrosse, girls lacrosse, and then cheerleading. Actually are the four sports that have the highest percentage, and three of those are over 20%, that being boys ice hockey, girls lacrosse, and cheerleading. And those sports, like I said, I think sometimes get under-recognized a little bit as far as that those are problems in those particular sports, particularly the cheerleaders. And so again, just something to be aware of, that we do see a higher percentage of those injuries overall in those particular sports. So next slide. What about trends? And so, over the last decade plus, and this research study has data from 5 years ago now, so this may have changed a little bit even more so since then. But we do see, as when we're looking at kind of what we just talked about on the last slide, concussions relative to total injuries, we're seeing a change in that spectrum. Now, does that mean that concussions are becoming more prevalent? Not necessarily. I think we're recognizing them more. So this probably is a true reflection of what we really actually see in each of those individual sports. But again, just drawing attention to girls soccer, which is now in that particular study from 2017, showed almost a third, or over a third actually, of concussions were what comprise the total injuries that occur in girls soccer. So certainly a concern there that we need to be paying attention to. So next slide. Then finally, before I turn it over to Karen, we just want to make sure that we're not just focusing on sports. I mean, obviously sports get a lot of attention. Right now, they're not getting much attention because there's not much to do with them. But concussions don't just happen in sports, but we know that they get the most attention. They also happen from injuries on playgrounds. They happen from PE class. They happen from episodes related to bullying, from falls. We do need to remember things related to domestic violence, and certainly with motor vehicle accidents. And even though those particular things are different injuries or happen from a different mechanism, we still can apply the same principles for those particular concussions that we see to what we do for management. And so the one potential there is that for some of those particular problems, for bullying, domestic violence, motor vehicle accidents, there may be more of a psychosocial component that develops some of their symptoms afterwards as well, with some of the post-traumatic consequences of those particular problems. And we may need to add some of those types of therapies into the mix as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen.
Great, thank you, Mark. Go ahead, next slide, Maria. So thank you, Mark, for setting the stage so nicely for us, and thank you also to NASHIA for organizing this webinar. As Becky talked about in the beginning, we're going to focus a little bit on REAP and how this can be a tool to help states get organized around this, this very complicated issue that's been going on for a couple of decades now. So I'm going to walk us through REAP. And before we do that, I'm going to give you the background on REAP. So next slide. So this all started for me way back in 2004. I was a school psychologist at a large high school here in Colorado. And we had a situation where we had a young football player named Jake Snakenberg who ended up in early September of 2004 having what is called second impact syndrome. And second impact syndrome is where you have one concussion, and before you are resolved from that concussion and you're still symptomatic, you take another hit to the head, and it can lead to a catastrophic outcome of either permanent brain damage or death. And this is the situation that we had with Jake Snakenberg here in Colorado in September of 2004. Next slide, please. The concern with second impact syndrome, of course, is that if we know that a young athlete has taken a hit to the head and they're still symptomatic, we want to prevent them from getting another hit to the head. So this is a somewhat preventable kind of situation that can happen. And we actually were noticing right about this time that number of young athletes across the country were beginning to have either permanent brain damage or death. In our situation here in Colorado, we actually were doing a study for the Center for Disease Control in 2004, and we had just tested our first group of athletes when we had this happen with Jake. And we ended up completing the study, which we completed in 2007. But it really did push our state forward as it did with many other states in terms of moving towards our return to play legislation. Next slide, please. So you can see here is a map of the United States. All 50 states and the District of Columbia now have return to play legislation, which actually started in 2009 in Washington State with the Zachary Halstead law, and then was followed quickly after that in Oregon with the Max's law. And unfortunately, as you go across the country, every state began to respond to the need to protect our young athletes from second impact syndrome or just, the kinds of even minor kinds of concussions that kids were having. So every state moved forward by 2014 with some type of legislation for return to play, how to safely get our athletes back to play. And all of the states have in common three things: some kind of education to some stakeholders, a removal of the athlete from play if we know that they have had a concussion, and then a return to play under some kind of medical clearance or guidance. So we all started moving forward with return to play legislation. Next slide. So after this happened in Colorado in 2004, a number of years later, we pulled all of our efforts together, and in 2009, I sat down and wrote the first version of REAP. And it was updated in 2012 after that consensus statement, and then updated again in 2016 after the Berlin guidelines. Next slide. And I'm very excited to say that we are moving into a partnership with NASHIA. When we have the new guidelines that we believe will come out in 2020, which will come out of Paris, if this still happens, depending on what's going on with the pandemic, we will have some updated guidelines that we will be able to write a version or update the version of REAP and be able to make a NASHIA version so that NASHIA will be able to help other states move forward. Next slide. What REAP has really seemed to have done in the number of years it's been around is it seems to really help to pull together a team approach. And an interdisciplinary team approach is an intentional term that we have used versus a multidisciplinary team approach. An interdisciplinary approach is all of our professionals working together. And you can see that there are 4 teams in REAP that are outlined. The family team is orange and the medical team is green. And at that time in 2009, we only really had one school team, which was more on the physical or sports side, which is the light blue. And we ended up writing into REAP that we needed to have 2 teams at school. One was the academic team. So we have a light blue and a dark blue team at school, and that covers the athletic side as well as the academic side. So REAP is a great jumping off point in a state to help to get all the teams to the table. And it helps to spell out what each team should be doing, and it helps the other team members know what other teams are focusing on. And that's really important. Each REAP that we have done or customized, we have been able to add local medical or sports stories into it, local resources on it, and the local return to play guide laws are on the back usually. So this has been a great way to get everybody kind of on the same page. It focuses on both return to play and return to learn, a little bit on each of those areas, and it is color coded, which really helps people know what parts they need to pay attention to. We have given REAP out in ski resorts here in Colorado, and I've had parents call me. They've been given one at a ski resort after their adolescent has had a hit to the head. They're back on the plane going back home, and they have been advised only to read the orange part because we don't want to overwhelm the parents. And then when they get back, make sure that the REAP gets to the school so that the school can start to look at the dark blue part. So it has helped to organize everybody's thinking and how to share this information. And and share the responsibility. So next slide. We actually have a website, reapconcussion.com, where we have uploaded all of the different states that have customized. Go ahead and next slide, Maria, we'll show that. These are all the states, and if you are wanting to download any of these, just go right to this website and download these different states. We're going to quickly go through, and I'll show you the states that have customized. Next slide. And this is in the order of recency. So Montana is the one that we are currently working on. It has not gone live yet, but we are customizing for them. And then you can see North Dakota, South Carolina, West Virginia. Next slide. We have customized for Hawaii, for Alabama, for Iowa, a couple of versions in Iowa, and for Nebraska. Next slide. We customized in New Jersey, Washington State, and we were even able to translate REAP into Spanish. Although if you look at that acronym there, that turned into REAR, and so we had to keep the P in there for pace, so it would stay REAP. And then the next slide. And then farthest back, we have USF, which is Florida, and then New York was our first state, and we customized for Long Island in New York as well. So those are the states that we have customized, and you can see if you take a little time to go on and look at any one of these, you'll see that there are local stories and local resources in each one of them, which really helps the states to get all of their advocates for concussion together to work on this issue. Next slide. So now I'm going to walk you through REAP and how it is used in the states, and I'll use this Colorado version as one. Go ahead to the next slide. We start with a timeline in REAP, and we really built REAP to cover the first 4 weeks of a concussion. Because as Mark said, that is really when the majority of our students who have a concussion are going to be showing symptoms and are going to need the most support. We hope that about 3 to 4 weeks into it that they are hopefully resolved of their concussion by that point. And so we need to act quickly, and we need to act all together in the beginning to make sure that we're all doing the right things. And that's what the REAP stands for. Those are the 4 steps of what we should do. So this just gives every team a timeline of what they should be focusing on and looking at as they go over the first 4 weeks together. So I'm going to break that down a little bit more. Go ahead with the next slide. So the concussion happens in the very beginning, and it's going to often be either our family team or the school physical team, the coach, the athletic trainer, or maybe the school nurse if it's a injury that happens in PE or in the hallway. That's going to be the first to recognize that there is an injury. And then our healthcare provider is going to be very important in the very beginning to diagnose and to be the one to decide what kinds of treatments need to happen. So in the very beginning, these are our team members who are going to be the first to kind of recognize the concussion. Next slide. And the first thing that everybody needs to do is remove the student from further injury to the head. So that's what this page shows, is that at home, that the parents need to remove them from any kind of recreational play where they could hit their head again, and the school physical team needs to pull them out of their school sports so that they don't hit their head again. So removal from anything physical and a reduction of the cognitive and social demands or stimulation. So that's what the R stands for in REAP. So I'm going to go through what those different teams just a little bit more. So the next slide, go ahead, Maria, is what the school physical team would do. So this would be the athletic trainer or the coach. If there isn't an athletic trainer in some schools, what they need to focus on is that they need to remove the student immediately from any physical play so they don't hit their head again. They may be doing daily symptom checks in the training room at school. They may be doing administration of a neurocognitive test at school. They're the biggest cheerleaders for these students in terms of listening to the restrictions at home and working with your teachers to cut down some of the demands at school, but they really can't be playing these students in any kind of a physical activity at school. Usually that means at school that they're removed from PE and any physical play at recess as well. And the updates to REAP that have come in the 2016 version included a little bit of an introduction of some safe, low-level cardio, generally to be done at home or in physical therapy. So that's what the light blue physical team does. Next slide. This is also, there are things that the medical team does in the beginning, and I'm going to turn this back over to Mark because he's the expert in the medical side to tell you what he would be looking for as a medical professional in the very beginning of a concussion.
Thanks, Karen. So as far as the medical team, when we have someone who has a suspected head injury, the first thing, obviously, we all need to be aware of is especially if an athlete is unconscious, which fortunately we know that loss of consciousness is not super common, less than 5%, some say less than 10% of injuries are going to result in loss of consciousness. We do want to evaluate the ABCs with that person, so that's airway, breathing, and circulation. And if the person is unconscious, we do need to make sure that we're assuming that that person may have an injury to their neck, because we cannot assess their ability to move their arms and legs and do they have sensation or function. And that's always a concern with a head injury, is that there could be other injuries to the neck associated with that as well, which could result in paralysis. And we obviously don't want to make those potential injuries worse by being cavalier with that person's neck and moving them, especially if we can't do a full assessment on them. Then we're going to want to do various things with mental status exams, and there's various tools that are out there to do this. Probably the most common thing is what's called the SCAT, and there's now the SCAT 5. There's a child version of that, which is meant for those 12 and under. And then there is the traditional SCAT, which is designed for 13 and over. And so there's various tools that are built into there. There are symptom checklists to assess the symptoms that person may be experiencing. And out of all the tools that have been looked at, the most consistently helpful have been assessing people's symptoms of what they're reporting to us. And then there's various parts and tools in there to assess their orientation, like where are they, what day of the week it is, do they recall what happened last, if it was a sporting event, who scored last as an example. And then there may be some things related to memory. So we do various tools such as having them, we'll recite them a set of numbers anywhere from 2 to 6 digits, and then they'll have to repeat them backwards to us. Or we may give them a group of words, of 5 words, and then they have to repeat those 5 words to us 3 times. And then at the end of the assessment, we'll assess them again and see how many of those 5 words they remember to look at their short-term memory. There's been a lot more attention paid now to looking at someone's ocular function. And we can combine this with the last one, which is balance and vestibular assessment. There is tools that are called the VOMs, so vestibular oculomotor assessments or screening. And so those types of tests can be done to assess for problems. We do see a lot of visual issues with concussions where people may have difficulties with their eye tracking that promotes symptoms. They may have troubles with screens. They may have troubles with their balance, dizziness, and those types of things. We can assess for those with various screening tools that may indicate things that may need some rehabilitation for. So next slide. So the things that we always talk about is what are the crucial things? When do we want to send someone to the emergency department after a suspected concussion? So one of those is with loss of consciousness, but the question is how long? And that's a hard one because typically the textbooks and articles will talk about 30 seconds of loss of consciousness is a concerning number, but I can guarantee you no one's sitting on a sideline or at any event with a stopwatch screening for everybody and when they go down and starting the stopwatch to see how long that person isn't moving. And so we don't really have truly an accurate assessment. And as someone who's been involved with many individuals who have had loss of consciousness, 10 seconds of loss of consciousness sometimes can seem like 20 minutes and vice versa. When it gets longer than that, it can seem like hours. So again, loss of consciousness and the time for that. If it's a prolonged loss of consciousness, that's something that we may want to send someone to the emergency department for. If they have any focal findings on their neurologic exam, so when we do further examination tests on them, if they have anything that suggests that there's a focal problem, like they have a difficulty with one extremity, they can't move it, they have the loss of sensation in that area, that would be concerning. They have progressively worsening mental status, so they're becoming more and more out of it, so to speak. Seizure activity I put on there, actually, interestingly though, seizure activity has not been correlated with having any significant problems, but seizures freak people out when they occur. And so generally, if someone has had a seizure, that is someone that's going to preferably be assessed in the ER afterwards. If they have progressively worsening headache, particularly to headaches that we describe as the worst headache of their life, that would be concerning. And repeated episodes of throwing up. And I always, when I give talks about throwing up and when do I send people into the ER, I always tell everybody I have a 2 puke rule. So if they've thrown up more than twice, it's time to send them in. But I give them 1 or 2 pukes free. And then the big concern there is why we want to send them into the ER is that those may be indicators that they may have more of a structural problem as opposed to a functioning problem, like we oftentimes describe concussions as, that they may need a CT scan. And so those people that may get sent in, they may get observed to start off in the ER because there's very specific protocols to evaluate these people and who truly does need a CT scan or not. And so that doesn't mean that these people are all going to need a scan or they're going to get a scan, but these are things that may indicate that, hey, someone probably needs to be observed or watched a little bit closer and then do further testing as necessary. So next slide. So what about getting scans? And so we do want to consider those for things that we refer to the ER, and typically CT scans or CAT scans are going to be what's going to be done first because that's quick and easy to do. The one problem to remember about those is that there is radiation involved, and so we are big discouragers of getting a scan just to, quote, look for something or to rule out an injury. And having a normal CAT scan is expected with a concussion. So when we talk about having a normal CAT scan, that does not mean that the person does not have a concussion. We totally expect them to be normal after concussions. If they're not, then something is more concerning there. There actually are some new techniques that are being done with something called a fast MRI that has been done kind of more of in a research setting. So that may be something that gets switched to for people that need imaging in the future, which is a much quicker type of MRI screening test. Rather than that, but not every place has that yet. And like I said, it's not necessarily ready totally for prime time yet. And so, but in some individuals that are may having more prolonged symptoms, we may consider an MRI if there's specific things that we're concerned about that an MRI may help us with. But again, we're not typically going to see the functioning problem in the brain on those particular tests. And so the vast majority of people with concussions and mild traumatic brain injuries do not need scans. So next slide. And so what do we do acutely? So we want to get that person out of their activity. So we do know if that someone gets a concussion from sports, from research, if they continue to play, they are 8 times have a higher likelihood to recover with a period longer than 21 days. So it does prolong their recovery, with a much higher risk by continuing to play through their injury. We also know that they have a much higher symptom burden and feel much worse if they continue to play after their injury. So that's why immediate removal is important for these individuals. We want to talk to them about the injury and talk about warning signs. And so those things that we discussed as far as reasons to go into the ER for. And again, we did, as I talked about before, lots of studies show high rates of people improving within 4 weeks. We do not recommend what's called cocooning. And so cocooning is an approach that some people took based off of basically taking what advice was given earlier, which was cognitive and physical rest, and taking it to an extreme where you would basically have that person not leave their house, not do anything, be in a dark room, so to speak. That has not been shown to help facilitate recovery. In fact, it's actually been shown to be harmful to someone's recovery and may slow that down. So we do not recommend that approach. We also don't recommend waking at night for the vast majority of people who get concussions. We're not seeing rates of people who are just passing away in the middle of the night because of their concussion without some other warning sign that pops up. And so we do recommend a good night's sleep for individuals. Now that may change in a very small kid, an infant who cannot communicate with you well as far as what stuff they're experiencing. But for the teenagers, middle schoolers, grade schoolers, who can at least give you an idea of how they're feeling, there is not a need to wake repetitively throughout the night. We do want to consider short times off of school, but prolonged time off has been shown also to be harmful from an academic standpoint for these kids and also socially and mentally for them. We do want to recommend them applying academic adjustments when they return, and I strongly encourage these kids to communicate with their teachers about their symptoms because it's not an outwardly visible injury. And then, as Karen was mentioning earlier, there is a change in what we recommend for physical activity. So we encourage light physical activity that does not provoke their symptoms. So I will suggest to patients doing either some brisk walking for 15 to 20 minutes or using an exercise bike as 2 options, and keeping it to those to start off with. And as long as their symptoms don't worsen or they don't develop a symptom that was not there present or that was not there previous to them exercising, I'll let them do that on a daily basis. And that's going to change based on how they're improving or not as time goes on. And we do know that the longer the injury goes on, physical activity is beneficial for their recovery. So certainly someone that's 4 to 6 weeks out, if they're not doing any level of physical activity at that point, we're going to get that person started on some level of physical activity because we know it helps them out. So next slide. And so things like Tylenol, ibuprofen are okay after we've evaluated them for concerning symptoms. However, there's not been any research to show that they really make a difference in overall symptoms, including the headaches. And so we do not recommend scheduling those medications, meaning taking them every 4 to 6 hours or alternating them on a regular basis. If we do use those medications for a prolonged period of time, people can develop what we call overuse headaches, where those medicines are in their system all the time and they can have worsening of their headaches because of that, or persistence of their headaches because of that. And there's actually no research out there that shows the benefit of any medication or any supplement for that matter to help with concussion, whether it's over the counter or prescription. So all of them are used to treat symptoms of any medication that is used. There's no medicine that's specifically designed to treat a concussion. And again, the research that's out there thus far for these don't show any help with those particular medicines. We do want to reduce the use of electronics if they are causing their symptoms to worsen, but we don't need to necessarily eliminate them. I tell everybody that screens by themselves are not harmful for concussion recovery. We do need to also remember that kids are highly socially connected through their electronics, and once you take those away, that can have an effect on what they feel as well. I put it in one way perspective, we don't want to treat concussion as a punishment. So if we think about it in terms of an athlete's already been told, hey, you have a concussion, you have to be out of your sport, and I can't give you an exact time frame as far as when that's going to get better, that you're going to get back to your normal sport. We expect you to get better, but I don't know, I can't give you an exact time frame. And then we start pulling away other stuff. Well, hey, don't hang around your friends, stay at home all day, you can't be on your phone, you can't text, all those types of things. That's basically punishing that kid now. And there's no, like I said, evidence that shows that those things are harmful for someone's recovery. We want to have them symptom limited though, because if they are using them and they are starting to worsen their symptoms, they take a break rather than necessarily having to eliminate those completely. We do generally recommend for those that are of driving age to restrict their driving in the early aspect of it. There haven't been any studies done on adolescents with this, but there are a couple of ER studies that were done on adults showing that they actually have a delay in their ability to respond to road hazards and driving simulators that they've put them into in the ER setting compared to other medical problems that may come in when they have a concussion. So we do know that there's a problem there, and especially in an inexperienced driver, I'm not wanting that person behind the wheel to start off with. And that'll, again, change as people start to improve. And then we want to consider rehabilitation. If someone has associated neck strain, which is very common with concussions, I get those kids into therapy very quickly because they oftentimes have a lot more troubles with their headaches when they have the associated neck strain. And then if they have significant symptoms related to their vestibular system or the oculomotor dysfunction, as we were talking about with the initial assessment, those are kids I'm going to consider for therapy as well. So next slide. And what are reasons why they may not be improving? So we have to think outside of the box because, again, since most kids are going to improve within that 4 to 6 week interval, kids that are lingering on beyond them may have some other issues that may be causing them to have symptoms that mimic the actual concussion but aren't truly the concussion themselves. So like I mentioned, neck injuries are one, developing depression and anxiety, which is, again, why we want to keep these kids somewhat physically active and not isolate them from everything. They may have troubles with their vestibular system, the oculomotor issues. They may have troubles related to their sleep or getting out of their normal circadian rhythm, which can also cause them lots. And so that could be excessive sleep or too little sleep. They may have actually an undiagnosed migraine disorder that has become more of a chronic daily migraine. And so those are things we need to think about. And then I put down malingering, which means that they're faking it, which I don't tend to see that so much in the athletes that I see because they actually want to get back typically to their sport. But certainly if there's other trauma, if there was a domestic violence as a source of it, or bullying or things like that, or even a car accident, we may see some post-traumatic stress type things that develop in those kids as a reason why they may not want to, or may be having persistent symptoms. And so I'm going to finish up there with the medical part and turn it back over to Karen.
Great, thanks, Mark. All right, next slide, Maria. All right, so what does the E in REAP stand for then? So E stands for educate. And so the symptoms that Mark talked about with a concussion will cover the gamut from physical, cognitive, emotional, and sleep and energy symptoms. We talk a lot about headache, and you'll hear that often, you're constantly asking your student, do you have a headache? But that isn't the only symptom out there. While it is the most common symptom to have a headache, there are other symptoms such as I can't remember, I can't concentrate, which is really going to impact school, or I'm really very tired and unable to kind of make it through the day without some rest periods, or my student is very much more emotional or very sad. And so all of those are symptoms of a concussion. And the reason why we put the E in REAP is that oftentimes knowing how they are recovering through their concussion has a lot to do with how severe their symptoms are. You would expect in the beginning of a concussion that they're going to be impacted more by almost all of these symptoms, or not everybody has all of the symptoms, but they're going to feel this more. And then as time goes on, every day and every week, you should see less and less of these symptoms as they're able to tolerate them, and they're showing some improvement in recovery. So that's why symptoms are so important in this whole 4 to 6 week process of how do I start to add back in a little bit more, knowing that they're not as symptomatic means that perhaps I can start moving them forward. So that's why this is so important. Next slide. As Mark has said, what a concussion really is not a structural problem. It's not something you can see on a CAT scan or an MRI. It's a functional problem. What a concussion really is a cellular injury. It has to do with what is inside the cell versus outside the cell. And while that balance has been disrupted, then the cell has been rendered inefficient, not broken, but inefficient. And as a result, what ends up happening is that the symptoms will flare when the brain is sort of running on empty. So the best way that we've been able to explain this when we're working with kids and with parents and teachers is kind of as an energy crisis. Next slide. What my kids and families really resonate with is when we explain it as a software problem, not a hardware problem, or you are an iPhone 4 and not an iPhone 11 or whatever we're up to now. You just run out of steam, you run out of battery, or you're a car with a small gas tank. And we use that analogy because we want our students to know that they can get out of the garage. You do not need to lay at home for 4 to 6 weeks and have it disrupt your life where you're doing nothing. But if you were a car with a small gas tank, you're going to get out a little bit and you're going to only cover so much territory. Perhaps you're only going to go to the post office and the grocery store today, and you're going to know where the gas stations are to fill. So do then fill. And that tends to help people to modulate their symptoms so that they can make it through the day, that they can keep some school going, they can keep some work going, but they're also still getting recovery. And since we can't fix the concussion with any medications for 4 to 6 weeks, we just need time and we need kind of a measured approach moving forward. We teach them to be able to manage their symptoms so that they are not flaring symptoms and feeling horrible and crashing and burning throughout the day. So that the E from REAP comes from educate, and then we teach families and schools and the student to adjust and accommodate moving forward. So next slide. So the adjust and accommodate really of REAP is really about management. And when you look at the time frame, the teams that really have to manage the management are the family team and the school academic team, because we want these kids to continue to go on with their life to some degree, but they're going to have to do it slightly differently. So we support the family in reducing some of the stimulation and limiting the texting and the video games and the screen time and limiting homework and doing too much running around. But as Mark has said, we don't want to eliminate it completely. We just want to limit it, and as each day and week goes by, we can probably add a little bit more in, which keeps them engaged in their life and not feeling like this is a punishment. Simultaneously, we also have to work with the schools on, we want them at school. We want them to return to school. And the article, the American Academy of Pediatrics clinical report, suggests when symptoms are tolerable, short-term, and amenable to rest. But while they're at school, we need to remove some of the work and reduce some of the work, and again, limit but not eliminate it completely. So we're teaching them to manage their symptoms so that they can keep life going for the 2 to 3 to 4 weeks that it takes for some recovery. So next slide. So for the family team, this is what REAP recommends that they do. To, first of all, take them to a doctor. Not every student with a concussion actually sees a doctor, but it would be great if everyone did. But for some of our families, reading REAP and even knowing this has been helpful in terms of knowing how to reduce some of the adjustments, even if they have not seen a doctor. A rest in the beginning and a reduction of symptoms until those symptoms begin to improve. Limit some things, but not eliminate all of the things that kids like to do, and to communicate with the school that this student is coming back and they're going to need some support for 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, and slowly move these students forward with those restrictions over the 4 weeks. Next slide. In terms of adjustments and accommodations at school, this is the dark blue part of REAP, and this is the symptom wheel, which helps teachers just begin to think about where does the student have symptoms and what are some academic adjustments I might be able to easily, quickly give them so I can support them feeling better while they're here at school. These are not formalized plans. This is not a 504. This is not an IEP, but these are just things that teachers can do to help to have them have a soft landing back into school and to continue to work with their symptoms and keep learning going. So this is the symptom wheel that is in the REAP book. Next slide. And this is also a page in the REAP book that is kind of devoted to return to learn, helping teachers understand a little bit more that there is going to be mental fatigue, which then impacts symptoms. There's going to be slow processing speed, which impacts the ability or amount of work that any student can complete during the time that they are recovering from a concussion. And it impacts their ability to learn, which is making new learning or short-term memory. And if we don't manage those well at school, we tend to have a lot of emotional, outbursts or reactions because kids get frustrated and they're struggling through this. So this is a page in REAP that helps for our educators do some adjustment and accommodation in the classroom. Next slide. And of course, what every student wants to know is, when can I get back to my sport? But now that we're talking about, students who are not necessarily athletes, and schools are, and some of the research is saying that that is about 40 to almost 50% of students that we are managing in schools with a concussion are not necessarily an athlete or didn't get their concussion in an athletic way. So they might be one that had a motor vehicle accident or, had a snowboarding accident. And so we are supporting all of those kids, whether they're getting back to sport or not. The REAP manual actually helps to walk all of the teams through the way that the student goes back to or gets cleared from a concussion or goes back to their sport is when they're back to their normal symptoms at home, back to their normal symptoms or no symptoms at school, or back to their learning level at school. If there was neurocognitive testing, that those scores are back where we think they should be. If they were seeing an athletic trainer or a physical therapist, that they have met all of those goals, and that if they are taking any medications, over-the-counter medications for symptoms of concussion, when they no longer need to do that, which would mean that the cells had healed and they're no longer flaring symptoms. When all of this happens, then we can begin to move towards clearance. Next slide. So we want to make sure all of those happen. And then, next slide. The REAP book even has within it a way to keep track of the symptoms. So at home or at school, they can be using this list of symptoms and making sure that these are decreasing over time. Next slide. And we've also added into the REAP book teacher feedback. As a school psychologist, I have felt strongly that we want to make sure that we are giving our teachers a chance to have input about the students' learning. Are they back to their pre-concussion learning level? If you're still needing to cut down their work because they're not retaining it as well, or they still can't take a test, then that would be a symptom still that they're cognitively not where they need to be. And so I require all of my students to go get input from their teachers here so that we are giving the teachers a chance to let us know what they're seeing as well. So that's in the REAP book as well, and anyone can use that. Next slide. So when you have all of your data saying that this student is 100% back to where they were at home, 100% back to where they were academically at school, and they have no symptoms per the athletic trainer or the school nurse or whoever's doing that, and the medical doctor is not picking up on any ocular, motor, vestibular issues, that's when we pass the baton back to kind of generally the healthcare provider to do the clearance. So this is why this is an interdisciplinary team approach. We all need to be working together. We all have our parts at certain parts of it. We're not all doing the same thing at the same time, but we need to be relying on each other's data to be making the next best decision for the student. Next slide. And so when all of the teams come together and there is consensus agreement that we have gotten to the point of symptom-free, then the Berlin guidelines recommend that there be a gradual re-entry back to sport for those who are athletes going back to a athletic activity. We would even suggest, though, that this be done somewhat informally, either at home or however schools want to do this to get them back to PE or physical play at recess. Basically, what you're doing here is as you increase the physical demands on the brain, you want to make sure that you're not flaring symptoms, because if you don't flare symptoms, then you know that you have full resolution of those symptoms and of the concussion, and you can start moving forward towards clearance. So next slide. So once you've finished those, then someone can give clearance and they can go back to sport and they go back to PE. So all of the teams are critical. And so when we work with states that customize REAP or even using a different state's REAP, we either can do trainings all together, kind of like in this webinar where we have different disciplines and we're speaking to all the different important roles of all the different teams. Or sometimes when I'm working with the state and I customize REAP for them and I go out to do trainings or we do webinars, we will do trainings for just each group. So there's a different language that we use when we're talking to parents and what they need to know. There's a different language like what Mark showed you on what medical doctors need to understand as they are working with these students. If I am working with an athletic trainer or groups of athletic trainers, we'll probably add some things in about sideline evaluation, et cetera. There's been a big push recently on return to learn, which is what do the educators, the teachers, the school nurses need to know? And that's a deep dive in the dark blue side here. And I do a lot of trainings for educators on how do we maintain and manage the students' re-entry back to school and ability to manage learning for the next 2 to 3 to 4 weeks while we're recovering from the concussion. So let me show you a little bit of a resource on that. Next slide. That is why we have had to develop additional resources for our educators, which we have called getschooled-on-concussions.com. This is a website that you can go to. And in this website, we have written many of the materials that our educators need to know specifically for how to support these students back in the classroom. Next slide. We have lesson plans for teachers on what to do about instruction, what to do about tests, how to support their symptoms in the classroom. We have made this completely 100% web-based, where all of the lessons are one page at a time so that we don't overwhelm our teachers. And we have added a new component called the Teacher Acute Concussion Tool. We call it the TACT for just-in-time training, which basically, instead of doing any advanced training or face-to-face training, especially now in the days of COVID, we have a way that when a student has a concussion, the teacher is invited to go into the computer answer some questions about how they teach, when they teach, what they teach, and an email, such as that you see here, flies into their inbox and gives them academic suggestions with these attached tip sheets on how to support a student in their classroom for 4 weeks. So emails will fly into their inbox for up to 4 weeks, supporting the general education teacher to be supporting the student for the first 4 weeks. And again, remember that if we act quickly, kind of like a public health model, if we act quickly and we support these kids right off the bat when they come in, and we support them for the first 4 weeks, we hope to prevent the protracted recovery or the difficulties that Mark was talking about earlier, where some of these kids are going into 6 or 8 weeks of symptoms and having to have more formalized plans. So this is what we have at the Get Schooled on concussion trainings, and we're quite able to help any of your states move forward with this for next year if you're interested. Next slide. So basically what we wanted to try to do here was show you how the REAP booklet helps all of the teams come together to know what their role is, to work together to support these students, especially in the very beginning of a concussion. It does take a village to support these kids as they come through this recovery because it is an invisible injury, and it's hard to get your fingers on it and to know who does what at what time. It's not really a hard process, but it is complicated because it requires so much interaction with each other, and sometimes that can be hard for everybody working together. But if we can help you in your state to have something like this in place, it gets all the teams together, working together, and then you can fine tune it to make it work better with your partners within your own state. So next slide. This is our information. If you have any questions or need to get a hold of Mark or myself with any other questions beyond this, and then we're also going to share some information with you about how to communicate with NASHIA if you have any interest in REAP. But I'm going to turn this back over to Maria about any questions you might have for us before we finish up today.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much again, Dr. McAvoy and Dr. Halstead. Really, wonderful resources for really any group of stakeholders. We didn't get any questions in the question pane today. We do have one question for you, though. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but as you know, all 50 states have passed some type of return to play legislation. What are your thoughts about whether states should also pass return to learn laws?
That's a good question. To my knowledge now, there are about 8 to 10 states that have some kind of a return to learn legislation and or language in their return to play legislation that talks about return to learn. The difficulty with return to learn language that I've seen is that all a state can really say in their return to learn legislation is that schools should do something to support these students, but it can't really tell you what it needs to do. And there's been a lack of content of what should schools do, what kinds of resources are out there for schools. So we're just beginning to provide the content for what schools might be able to bring in to support their students. So there's still some work that needs to be done in terms of what would that look like and what resources can we use for that. And now with COVID, I think it's going to be difficult for schools to kind of think about that as they're going back to school. But the other side of that is that schools have always, historically, it's always been their obligation to help every student with any medical or psychological condition, no matter what. So even if a school or a state doesn't have return to learn legislation, most schools know that it is their obligation to support a student coming back into school for whatever reason, and for whatever reason they're struggling, they're going to find a way to support them. So we're just trying to get resources out to schools now to help them support kids specifically with concussion.
No, that makes sense. Thank you. And after the webinar today, I hope that you all see that there are resources available. So please do feel free to reach out to us at NASHIA and to the presenters as well if you're interested in taking advantage of these resources. I hope you enjoyed our webinar today. Here we are planning, NASHIA is planning to do some additional webinars the remainder of the year, and keep an eye on your inboxes as we'll make sure to promote the dates of the upcoming webinars via email and on our website as well. And of course, please continue to save the date for NASHIA's annual SOS conference in September. We are still planning to meet in Minneapolis, but are very cognizant of the current uncertainties related to state budgets and travel, and are committed to providing our content in a safe format for everyone. So as things evolve, we will certainly also be putting out information via email and on our website as well. So with that, thank you so much again for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. We are very excited about the REAP resource and being able to partner with these two professionals and be able to provide additional resources for state capacity. Look forward to working with you all in the future, and hope you're all able to stay safe and healthy and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.